will save the world. So wrote the 19th century Russian novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky. I'm Andrew Petiprin, Fellow of Popular Culture at the Word on Fire Institute. What Dostoevsky meant by beauty will save the world has been debated by many people. And in 1974, another Russian, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, elaborated on the statement with these words: "Perhaps the old trinity of truth, goodness, and beauty is not simply the decorous and antiquated formula it seemed to us at the time of our self-confident materialistic youth. If the tops of these three trees do converge, as thinkers used to claim, and if the all too obvious and overly straight sprouts of truth and goodness have been crushed, cut down, or not permitted to grow, then perhaps the whimsical, unpredictable, and ever surprising shoots of beauty will force their way through and soar up to that very spot, thereby fulfilling the task of all three: truth, beauty, and goodness, sometimes referred to as the transcendentals, the things that endure, and the things that rise above the ordinary. But as Solzhenitsyn says, beauty plays a special role among the three. What is true or what is good can both be difficult to discern. And as Solzhenitsyn saw with his own eyes, both the true and the good can sometimes be manipulated or stamped out by tyrants. But beauty is a little different. You can't pin it down. You can't control it. You know it when you see it. For this reason, it really can reveal truth and goodness where it is hidden. Beauty can draw the soul heavenward when counterfeit truth and corrupted goodness weigh us down. Beauty is, of course, what art is often meant to convey. But it is also a topic in itself for artists to contemplate. As Pope St. John Paul II wrote in 1999, the artist has a special relationship to beauty. In a very true sense, it can be said that beauty is the vocation bestowed on him by the Creator in the gift of artistic talent. Indeed, where artists participate in some way in real beauty, whether they are professing Christians or not, John Paul says, the gospel message is filled to the brim of what they create. In this video, we'll explore 3 Italian films, beautiful works from a culture known for beauty, all of which explore in various ways beauty's power to bring truth and goodness into the picture too. First, we look at Bernardo Bertolucci's sensual 1996 offering, Stealing Beauty. Then we explore Paolo Sorrentino's 2013 film, The Great Beauty. We conclude with Roberto Benigni's delightful, tear-jerking classic from 1997, Life is Beautiful. Stealing Beauty is a later film from the Italian director Bernardo Bertolucci, who, earlier in his career, was responsible for one of the most controversial movies of all time, 1972's Last Tango in Paris, a grotesquely erotic, borderline pornographic film starring Marlon Brando. Stealing Beauty is different. It is also very sensual. But on the whole, the mystery of beauty is preserved, allowing our deeper contemplation about the things that endure beyond the mere allure of young, attractive bodies. Starring Liv Tyler in one of her earliest big-screen roles, along with Jeremy Irons and an ensemble European cast. Stealing Beauty is a coming-of-age story set in the picture-perfect Tuscan countryside. Liv Tyler's character, Lucy, travels to Italy in the aftermath of her mother's death, and she stays with a group of artists who knew her mother, a poet, years previously. Lucy experiences many awakenings including engaging in deep intellectual conversation with artists and smoking marijuana with the locals. And yet, she sees no need for her beauty to conflict with her virtue. She is a virgin, and she tells the dying writer, Alex Parrish, played by Jeremy Irons, it's easier to stay alone. Alex replies, "You can't have decided that at your age. You're in need of a ravisher." Lucy replies with a double meaning, "I'm waiting." Eventually, Lucy poses for a portrait by her host, Ian, played by Donald McCann, whom she eventually learns is her biological father. In the portrait sitting, Lucy exposes one of her breasts, and far from implying something incestuous, it is instead a gesture of self-revelation. Ian is not aroused, but invited instead into the mystery of his subject's identity. As Lucy is posing, however, two local men, Niccolo and Osvaldo, drive up. Niccolo leers at Lucy, and Osvaldo rebukes him, but he also rebukes Lucy for her immodesty. We realize later, however, that Osvaldo is not upset at the moral scandal of all naked women, but rather is upset to see this naked woman on display for others because he is in love with her. The whole scene reminds us of the sharp distinction between gross pornographic images and the spiritual allure of the classical nude. No one, after all, stands in front of Sandro Botticelli's 15th century masterpiece, The Birth of Venus, at the Uffizi Gallery in Florence and says, "Oh, how scandalous." Rather, the body, in the glory painted or sculpted by the artist with skill to capture more than mere flesh, reveals the mysterious God-givenness that is the essence of existence. Stealing Beauty ends with something of an end of innocence and a partial waste of beauty, as Lucy loses her virginity to Osvaldo, albeit in the most romantic possible setting. Some sense of wholesomeness is restored, however, when we learn that it was also Osvaldo's first time. Whether the pair will stay together and raise a big family in the Tuscan countryside is a matter that is unresolved when the credits roll. The big takeaway of Stealing Beauty is life is animated first of all by the transcendental virtues, and beauty above all. As the old Monsieur Guillaume says, there is not love, there's only proof of love. For followers of Christ, his love is always incarnational, embodied now among his followers, and felt more deeply when presented more beautifully. The food and wine and starlit nights and views of vineyards and rolling hills, and most of all, a young person coming of age, all point to the mystery that Christ unveils to his disciples in St. John's Gospel, chapter 10, verse 10. I came that they might have life and have it abundantly. Paolo Sorrentino's The Great Beauty is both a tribute and a critique of the city of Rome, as experienced through some of its most beautiful people. Sorrentino follows the great Italian director Federico Fellini in depicting a lifestyle that tries in vain to achieve beauty while either disdaining or ignoring transcendent truth and pursuing goodness outside of individual desire. It's in vain because of the setting, the eternal city of Rome. As in Paolo Sorrentino's two television series for HBO, The Young Pope and The New Pope, in The Great Beauty there looms in the background of every debauched Roman dinner party two unique features: the ruins of pagan antiquity destined to fall, and the living headquarters of Christ's church on earth, the Vatican, against which the gates of hell shall not prevail. Contrasting with every nihilistic modern art exhibition or experimental film are Michelangelo's Christian masterpieces: the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, the Pietà in St. Peter's, the statue of Moses at the tomb of Pope Julius II, and the statue of the risen Christ at the Basilica of Santa Maria sopra Minerva, just to name a few. Rome is saturated with the highest artistic achievements in Western culture, inextricably linked to the Catholic faith. Everywhere you look, beauty forces the contemplative soul towards truth and goodness. In this world lives Jep Gambardella, portrayed brilliantly by Tony Servillo. In fact, Jep doesn't just live in this world, he rules it. He says about himself, "I didn't just want to live the high life, I wanted to be the king of the high life. I didn't just want to attend parties, I wanted the power to make them fail." Jep is a writer whose wealth has accumulated on the back of frivolous magazine work, while his one critically acclaimed novel recedes further from view as each year passes. Jep is unmarried and childless, 65 years old and determined to retain youthful attractiveness by way of fancy clothes, Botox injections, and sleeping with young women. He hosts elegant gatherings of debauched intellectuals on his terrace overlooking the Roman Colosseum. And when we meet him in The Great Beauty, we find a man who is at once bored by his own vices and cynical of others who rationalize or idealize the superficial existence he embraces. Jep knows somehow that real beauty has always eluded him. And to experience beauty would require an abandonment of self thoroughly at odds with his hedonistic lifestyle. Deep down, Jep knows he is ugly. At various points in the film, we see why. Sorrentino shows us the magic of true beauty which contrasts with the decadence Jep cannot fully escape. At one point in the film, Jep suddenly learns that the great love of his early life, Elsa, has died. Her husband tells Jep that she always loved Jep more, causing him to think deeply about the meaning of reality in a new way. Jep then meets Ramona, an aging stripper who captivates him in this moment of vulnerability. In one scene, Jep sneaks away from a party with Ramona, and the two encounter one of Jep's friends, a keeper of keys for the Vatican. Together, the three of them unlock and walk through one door after another, taking in one breathtaking room after another. It's nighttime, and there are no tourists. It's as if they have all of the finest offerings of Almighty God, all to themselves. Jep loses Ramona just as a third and most unlikely woman enters the story, the saintly, extremely old nun, Sister Maria, whose aloofness from the material world and whose physical ugliness convict Jep more deeply about the nature and power of true beauty. Towards the very end of the film, Sister Maria makes the agonizing climb up the 28 marble steps of the Scala Sancta on her knees, an act of fearless devotion to God that embodies the unpredictable nature of beauty that Solzhenitsyn talked about in his Nobel acceptance speech. In the final scene of the film, Jep returns to the sensual memory of his first love and declares that he is starting a new novel. After years of selfishness akin to self-abuse in the face of true beauty all around him, Jep decides, finally, to create again, to aim for something spiritually transcendent at long last, even if his personal holiness falls far short of Sister Maria's. It's hard to think of any film whose visual beauty matches the virtues it depicts more perfectly than Life is Beautiful. Written, directed by, and starring Roberto Benigni. Although the subject matter of the film turns very dark, when the story finishes and you wipe away your tears, you stop and realize that Solzhenitsyn's musing on Dostoevsky isn't a pipe dream. Maybe beauty really will save the world. Life is Beautiful is the story of Guido Orefice, a role for which Roberto Benigni won the Academy Award for Best Actor, memorably jumping all over the seats of the auditorium and hugging random strangers in his exuberant ascent of the award stage. Benigni's performance in the film is simply astonishing. Guido is an Italian Jew who wears his outsider status in Italian society very lightly, despite the rise of Mussolini, fascism, and the evil anti-Semitic program of Hitler and the Nazis. While the world melts down around him, Guido is a perpetual optimist, making a joyous adventure out of everything from driving a car with no brakes, to riding a horse into a fancy dinner, to ultimately keeping his son alive in a concentration camp. Guido has learned his craft at the feet of his beloved Uncle Leo, a restaurateur who promotes beauty in everyday life. He tells Guido, "Nothing's more necessary than the unnecessary." Guido finds this beauty everywhere too, and particularly in the love of his life, his principessa, Dora, played by Benigni's real-life wife, Nicoletta Braschi. To woo Dora, Guido shows up at the school where she teaches, pretending to be the fascist education inspector. Guido proceeds to give the children a fake lesson about the superiority of the Aryan race, taking off most of his clothes and laughing about his belly button, declaring, "The body's beautiful." Guido finally wins Dora after sitting in an opera by Offenbach, looking up at Dora and attempting to use the willpower technique taught to him by his friend, an avid reader of the philosopher Schopenhauer. Guido whispers, "I love you. I love you." Guido and Dora marry, leaving Dora cut off from her well-to-do, politically connected family. But the couple are blissfully happy with their son Josue. Guido opens up a small bookshop. Life is beautiful. For a while. Suddenly, Guido and Josue are taken away with Uncle Leo to a train headed to a Nazi concentration camp. As we have all seen in many films, both documentaries and works of fiction, the train cars carrying Jewish people to the Holocaust are anything but beautiful. The Nazis made sure their victims were made to feel inhuman, with every aesthetic pleasure taken away to boot. But piercing through the cruel ugliness, Dora, wearing a bright red dress, demands to be put on the train too. There is nothing more beautiful than solidarity with those we love and sacrifice for the well-being of others. And this beauty carries forward in perhaps the film's most famous element, Guido's elaborate ruse inside the concentration camp to make his son believe they are playing a game. Each day he returns from back-breaking labor only to summon, somehow, the energy to fill Josue in on how many points they scored that day against the bad guys. Guido also finds a way to make life beautiful for Dora, who is suffering on the opposite side of the camp with the other women prisoners. He risks his life to commandeer a record player and broadcast the same Offenbach opera they had experienced together earlier in the film. Dora's resting face of sadness turns into pure hope, as Guido cannot help himself but to find and share something that transcends the misery that not only he and his family must endure, but his whole people. At the same time, Uncle Leo goes to the gas chamber, pausing as he takes off his clothes for the last time to extend common decency to a stone-faced Nazi prison guard who has tripped and fallen. Guido has one more chance, shortly before his death, to play the Offenbach record. The camera pans up, finally reaching Dora. The things that endure, endure. Even the brutality of stomping boots cannot kick truth and goodness to the curb forever. Dora and Josue make it out alive. When the boy sees his mother, he declares, "We won, we won." Indeed. In his book, On the Way to Jesus Christ, Joseph Ratzinger wrote, "The encounter with beauty can become the wound of the arrow that strikes the soul and thus makes it see clearly, so that henceforth it has criteria based on what it has experienced and can now weigh the arguments correctly." Stealing beauty the great beauty, and life is beautiful, are 3 arrows that have pierced my soul. May they pierce yours too.